Right, let's bring in some reaction. For more on the revitalization of the IFP, we're joined now by political analyst Dr. Imraan Buccus. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, these elections have proved many surprises, not least of which could now be the spectacular revitalization of the IFP in KwaZulu-Natal, being part of the Government of National Unity. What are your first impressions?
Well, thanks, Mpo. I'm not sure whether it would be spectacular, but yes, you're right. Since '94, we've seen a steady decline in the IFP until about 2019. I think there was a dramatic decline in the graph, and then in 2019, a sharp incline. And of course, we've seen an increase again in 2024. So yes, I mean, the IFP was popular, was pushed to the periphery, and has re-emerged. And I think its re-emergence, was in some part linked to the implosion in the NFP, linked to the strides it made in northern KwaZulu-Natal, and I think in part also linked to the decline of Zuma and, Zuma having exited the ANC and having been moved from the power position he had in the ANC. So I think a number of factors contributed to the political ascendancy to the IFP. So not a complete surprise, I'd say.
Yeah. So with the IFP being the second oldest political party existing in South Africa, it suffered many setbacks and losses, as you've made mention of. And it also seems like a distant memory that in 1994, the IFP had served as part of a collective leadership of the Government of National Unity. Without the party's former leader, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, what does the IFP today bring to the table in this setup?
Well, I think, the politics of the coalition, I would say, has a really broad spectrum, right? Who would have thought that the DA and the IFP would kind of be on the same side together with the ANC? But I think the political context has led us to this, and, it's an imperfect solution. But I think, we're left with little other choice. I think one of the things that many people will be concerned about is how will the coalition nationally manage the contradictions. And I think that's a concern in KZN too, right? You have the MK party with at least 45% of the vote being left on the periphery. And I know many people are concerned about that, but the point I had made earlier is that in parliamentary politics, the 45% is neither here nor there. The reality is that you have to cohere with other parties. You have to be able to form a coalition. And I think the MK party has in large part been in disarray and hasn't been able to do that. And, Ntuli's been making the point that, at least 55% of people did not support MK. So it was the ability of the ANC, the DA and the IFP to cohere, and I think that has led to their kind of electoral victory in KZN.
You speak about the MK. I mean, we saw yesterday former President Jacob Zuma giving a press briefing where he cautioned that the ANC and DA were misleading the public by referring to their coalition as a government of national unity. What's to be made of that? How should one interpret that?
The fact that MK participated in elections means that it adheres to constitutionalism, right? So I think, some of the tactics being used by MK, I think, are unnecessary. But I think on the other part, one needs to allow MK to play all of its cards. And I think it's played most of its cards already. But the reality is MK needs to be allowed to exhaust the court processes, and then we need to revert, we need to, reassert this idea that we're part of a constitutional democracy. And I think MK will need to accept the outcome of that. Any kind of talk that tends towards violence or instability will have to be dealt with by security agencies and the police. But I think the other point I want to make is that while MK has been raising these points in addition to what they were saying at the press conference last night, I think we should also acknowledge that the leadership of MK has behaved in a credible way, has shown the kind of leadership that I think is necessary at this time. We haven't seen the kind of belligerent speech one would expect. And bearing in mind that they have already lost a number of their own party members, and yet have continued to call for calm and have engaged in a kind of political posturing that I think is much needed, despite what we're hearing at the press conference and the like.
So in terms of its significance and how it steers in the next coming years and the impact that it will have, I mean, what are the kind of expectations on this tone of court wrangling and mature leadership as we look at the party and begin to assess its full impact?
Well, I think to talk about this in a more pointed way, I think the party is in large part in disarray, right? Of course, it got 45% of the vote. It did reasonably well nationally to emerge as the third largest party. But I think if you look at its policy architecture, if you look at its manifesto, if you look at the ranklings about party list, this is a party in disarray. And if you look particularly at KZN, I think there was a huge move towards MK because people were disillusioned with the political establishment. And yes, people move towards parties that might use ethnicity for mobilization, like we're seeing with the Patriotic Alliance in the Western Cape. But I think the more recent happenings in the ranks of the MK is probably leading to a renewed disillusionment with the electorate. They had expected this party to emerge as a leader in KZN. I think through its own doing, its inability to cohere with other parties, it's now, on the periphery of governance in KZN. And I think that sends a message that's not encouraging for MK. And, a party built around the gravitas of former President Zuma, and a party that kind of fragments from the ANC, generally these parties don't enjoy political longevity. My own sense is that I don't see the party enjoying that kind of political longevity beyond former President Zuma.
Thank you very much. Let's perhaps leave it there for now. Thank you for your time, Dr. Imraan Buccus, there giving us a sense of the political dynamics, looking at the IFP and the MK, of course, looking at some points, putting some points to the fore.